G'day, legends. I hope that you are having a fantastic day and that you've had a fantastic week. Friday in Australia, probably Thursday wherever you are. We're not leading much else other than the time zones, but either way, I hope you're having a great week and leading into a great weekend. Now, we do have a lot to talk over today. I'm sorry that these videos just get longer and longer and longer. I apologize. I just think it's important to go over everything and how it all links in. If I can get them shorter, I will. Trust me. Length is not a problem in my everyday life normally. But today we're going to talk about more money with the Pentagon and President Biden in the US. The Su-34s, which apparently are just falling out of the sky everywhere. Putin did a just over 2-hour speech, like press conferencey thing. Of course, then we'll have a look at the maps. That'll be right in the beginning, sort of middle of the video because it'll push out. And we'll talk a little bit about some like 4-dimensional chess games that some people are speaking about also. But I think something not being spoke about today that I believe is unbelievably important, because I didn't even find it in my research until right at the end. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to open with this, is Finland has put no restrictions on weapons provided to Ukraine to be used inside of Russia. Now, Russia and Finland have a very, let's say, interesting relationship, and amongst Finnish soldiers, there's a lot of different opinions on this war too. We know as far as foreign soldiers fighting in Ukraine, a heap from Finland have gone, but we also know that a lot of foreigners who have signed up for things like Wagner PMC are also Finnish. So there's definitely, people with the finger in the pie as much as, fighting on the ground. But as far as the government, we saw Finland has joined NATO because of Russia's invasion into Ukraine, as then Sweden has then followed. So Finland has become a NATO country. And this, I believe, is major. So this is what the Kyiv Independent put out from Finnish Defence Minister Antti Häkkänen. Now, Ukraine can use Finnish-provided weapons to strike Russian territory. Now, here he said that restrictions were primarily being set by countries that have supplied Finland with long-range weapon systems. And this is one of these things that the US, the UK didn't want these missiles cruising out into Russia. And I think it's pretty obvious of why you can see there could be further down the line consequences with this. But I've spoken openly about if Ukraine is like nerfed into not striking or hitting in Russia, then the actual ability to use these systems and take back territory is greatly, greatly limited if it's just domestic developed weapons in Ukraine. Now, we know there are domestic developed weapons in Ukraine that are getting a lot of external outside support, but still, it still has a major influence on the front line, especially to try and hit, say, air defense systems or barracks, whatever, that are sitting within Russian territory. So he has said, Ukraine should also strike military targets on the Russian side, if necessary. Otherwise, these military objects will strike on the Ukrainian side. This is absolutely legal defense struggle, which Ukraine is waging. The UN Charter allows attacking military targets across land borders. So this is from Jukka Kopra, the member of Finland's parliament. Here, at the moment, big countries that, among other things, have provided long-range missile systems, of course, also have the right to specify how they should be used. This is from the minister here, also then talking about Germans not sending the Taurus system. Now, one thing that isn't really put out in this, as we do know Finland's given a lot of aid into Ukraine, a lot too that is financial aid to other countries to send weapons, is what is meant by Finnish provided systems. So Finland's defense industry is not, say, the US's, where they create the system. Finland buys a lot of its systems in. For example, this is a Finnish multiple launch rocket system, but is a variant of the Yank 270 Alpha 1. So a system like this, just for example, can this be used? Or where does the licensing and everything work on this with the US? So that's something I don't know. And I think will maybe come out in time. And my gut feeling is it's going to have to be domestically owned and produced Finnish stuff crossing that border. The US is not going to want, or Germany is not going to want, the Leopards that are in Finland to then cross. You need to understand too that the defense industry amongst countries, this isn't just a sole like country, like Australia with Abrams tanks we spoke about yesterday. They're not just Australian Abrams. They've got many systems in them from different countries around the world. We, as far as I'm aware, we don't really own them. We more rent them. And this is the case other ways as too. Say Australian radar systems going into other nations that we still have the rights and how it's used, blah, blah, blah. And there's this massive expanse of that. But I thought that was very interesting to open up, and maybe we will see then other countries follow suit and allow more targeting inside of Russia, because in my opinion, I just don't see how this ground, specifically up in this northeastern area, can actually be cleared without further strikes into Russia. Maybe back a little bit, but the use case of some of these weapons, if Russia can sit everything out inside of their own borders, is going to be greatly, greatly limited. Now, the next point I want to get on is something I see speculated a lot about. So we're going to talk down in Avdiivka just for example of this. So here's Ukraine. Here's the capital of Kyiv. Red areas occupied since 22 and the purple since 2014. So we see then Avdiivka here where Ukraine is losing some ground. Russia is gaining. There has been withdrawals. There's been villages and towns fall. Just quickly, not too much change shown on this map, but we will have a look then on Syriac because it is saying a different story here. But what I want to talk about is some people have said, is Ukraine playing some sort of 4-dimensional, 5-dimensional chess game to attempt to overextend Russia and then have an offensive and easily take out these elements? Now, I've spoken about this in length before, that I don't think that now that 2 years into the war, we haven't seen any 4-dimensional chess moves actually pulled off in the war. We initially thought when Russia invaded with what we thought wasn't like the full power of the Russian military, because we're like, well, Russia's military is meant to be, this massive beast. How haven't they got air superiority? How have they not, had the Su-57s in the air, all of this? So we thought there might have been some game there. Didn't happen. Ukraine's counteroffensive, we thought there's going to be some 4D chess game going on here and take some Russian land to swap back. Didn't happen. So I think that these 4D chess pieces moving that people may see or want to see, I don't think it actually exists on a modern battlefield like this, especially now, over 2 years in. We have battlefield intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, what is unbelievable now. Nothing is hidden. You can't take a dump without it being seen. This is why I question losses. We're going to talk about this. And worldwide, ISR as well. If you can see the political landscape, people know who the players are. There's satellites in the air. I just don't think that anything major like that can be really prepared now that just everything is seen, that we'll have more of this like stalemate. So what people are sort of suggesting is that Russia gets some sort of, they push out here and this 4D chess game to overextend them and cut off. But in my opinion, this has actually helped Russia, this move, because they had, let's just draw the rough of what Avdiivka then looked like. Now, let's just say it was like this. So Russia was then attacking on we're just going to go with it. I'll keep moving the map, but rough, let's say 30-kilometer front line. Now, by then the withdrawal closing this up, they have then closed, again, super rough, but you get what I mean, to, let's say, an 8-kilometer front line. So it's, if anything, actually done the opposite of extending those troops. And we've seen that because they can now have less people in these locations and you can put all your artillery, closer together and you're striking certain smaller areas, it becomes easier. So that's just my opinion on the 4D chess game. I don't think that there's any 4D chess going on really within some, at least frontline tactics on this war. Yes, I'll agree there probably is in economic, financial systems around the world who have influence in this war. I think one of the main ones that comes to mind is like China. Like, who's China really an ally with? Well, they're not like, they're not like this with Russia. They're definitely not like this with the West, but both their two major competitors, being Russia and the West, are draining a lot of their ammo in this. Now, is this their doing? No, it's just, a benefit of them sticking back and going, what's happening over there, as well as gaining experience without a dog in the fight, to a degree. But you can disagree with that as you wish, but I just don't think what we're seeing. I think the frontline movements we're seeing are a lack of ammo, an increase in air power from Russia, and, a change in morale and leadership. That's it. to try and read more and more and more into this. I haven't seen it during the war yet, and I've been on the lookout for it. I believed some of those. I believed it in the initial invasion. I believed it in the Ukraine counteroffensive. Didn't see it, and I don't think that we'll then see it further. Now, we have to speak about this first because someone sent me this, and I was a bit, I should have known this, but I didn't. But I hate politicians playing politics when it is at the expense of young men's blood. It is shocking. And we're seeing a bit of this in the States. Of course, we're seeing it in the House of Reps, although only yesterday on the 29th that the Speaker of the House did say they will consider the $60 billion once America's interests are looked after, or words to that effect, that basically bring in something for the border, which is the main element they're talking about, and we'll consider that $60 billion, it's $95 billion all over, to go into Ukraine. But there is more money. The Pentagon has more money. Now, CNN published this yesterday. The Pentagon is weighing whether to tap into the last remaining source of funding. The Defense Department still has around $4 billion in Presidential Drawdown Authority funds available for Ukraine, which allows the Pentagon to draw from its own stockpiles to send military equipment to Kyiv. Kyiv, Ukraine, is begging for ammo, mainly ammo, especially for somewhere like Avdiivka. $4 billion, yes, it's less than $60 billion. That's a hell of a lot of money, especially if you're buying things like shells. That could have had a huge, huge effect. And maybe, if there wasn't playing politics in this, that it could have, gone in and halted that fall of somewhere very major like this. The Pentagon had previously been reluctant to spend any of that remaining money without assurances it would be reimbursed by Congress through the administration's $60 billion supplemental funding request, because taking from the DoD stockpiles with no plan to replenish that equipment could impact US military readiness. Trust me, the US military is going to find the money if they need another $4 billion to, increase their own stockpiles. I can see that it's going to be a problem, but the US military are talking in $1 trillion or more dollars than this. In my opinion, this is playing politics to try and move things across the line, which I know this is how war works. I was naive to this when I was in the military, and I'm not embarrassed to say that, but it's a terrible thing that, this money would have made a difference. Everyone's pointing at the House of Reps, when on the other side, you've got $4 billion still sitting there. Asked about the possibility of tapping into the remaining $4 billion, Defense Department spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Garen Garn said in a statement, the DoD continues to urge Congress to pass a supplemental to support Ukraine in its time of need and to replenish our stocks, sort of avoiding that there, the meat of it. Officials said the department could go ahead and spend part of its $4 billion even without finding money internally that could be used to replenish it. But it would not be unprecedented for the Pentagon to find additional unexpected sources of funding. I guarantee the Pentagon is going to find this if needed. Last year, the Defense Department announced that it had discovered an accounting error that led the DoD to overvaluing the amount of aid provided to Ukraine by $6.2 billion. We spoke about this at the time. It was basically that, hey, this equipment was a replacement value. So if you've got this, old Humvee going to Ukraine to replace that, and we need, an Oshkosh or whatever they are to then replace, that it's going to cost this much. But the Humvee's not worth that much. What we don't know is how much did they actually say it was worth? Because could you go, well, that's worth $1. Someone's banging on my door. Because, of course, if you just put that at that it's worth $1, well, you can find a lot of other money. But if you make a $1 accounting mistake, trust me, the ATO in Australia or whoever the American tax is, they'll be after it. But last month, Ryder spoke about some concerns the department had in tapping into those funds. At issue, here again, is the question of impacting our own readiness as a nation and the responsibilities that we have. Now, and yes, so while we do have that $4.2 billion in authority, we don't have the funds available to us to replenish those stocks should we expend that. And with no timeline in sight, we have to make those hard decisions. Officials said here, if another one comes, of course, it will be with critical munitions. Now, Zelensky has told CNN this week, people will be prepared, but ammunition will not be prepared and brigades will not be ready, not only for our counteroffensive, they will not be ready to defend, to stay strong, and it will be very difficult. We know that there is an ammo shortage on the front line. We know that there are problems, and look, this is really pulling away, and people are saying there's not going to be a Ukrainian offensive this year because of these issues. It needs to be getting prepared now for spring. It's bloody March the 1st. We're really getting into the year. And of course, people are saying in that 4D chess thing that I said in the beginning about that overextension is Ukraine playing up how bad its ammo shortages, man shortages are to try and attempt to have Russia overextend? I don't believe that. I believe that there are really bad shortages in Ukraine currently. Now, back onto the maps, and we'll come back down into Avdiivka because this is where we're seeing the most amount of move and a really critical situation. Now, deep state map, really nothing has happened. The only thing is it has said that Russia has lost a little bit of ground here near Stepove, but no real update compared to what we saw over the past few days, few weeks here. But Syriac is painting a different picture, and we have some stuff from General Shyrsky here as well. But firstly, what we'll then read is we'll read what the MOD says. Territory west of Avdiivka, so out in here, remains the focal effort of Russia's offensive in eastern Ukraine. Russia took control of Avdiivka on 17th of Feb and has since advanced approximately 6 kilometers from the center of the town, which is a long way in. If you look at any advancement in the past at least 12 months, that is a long way. Russia has almost certainly taken control of several villages in the area as far as these. So we're talking Severny, Stepove, Lastachinki, and there are people claiming these other three here as well. These tactical gains serve primarily to consolidate Russian positions around Avdiivka, what we spoke about in that 4D chess. It's pulled everything back together. Russia is also likely seeking to build momentum on the axis to take advantage of the fact that there are fewer fixed, well-defended positions and urban areas from which Ukrainian forces can defend. Exactly what we've spoken about with these built-up positions aren't really there. We know this is the first line of defense, second line of defense runs through here, and what is the actual build-up there? And we have seen officers in the Ukrainian military basically call out and go, it's not to the level that it should be. Now, I think this is probably the part people like the most that I do is actually the comparison of, say, the Syriac map. I wish there was a zoom in between this and then the deep state. So this isn't the greatest image of the map here, but that there is a push through both Stepove, Badachi here coming down into Semenivka, and that Orlivka has come under control. And this is showing basically that Severny and Tonenki are coming under control as well. We'll show this as there is a lot of speculation about what's happening at the front. Situation west of Avdiivka, Russian army can continue to advance inside Badachi and the southern plantations as Ukrainian army continue to retreat towards Semenivka, shown by these arrows, from this locality to Orlivka, which was completely taken by Russian forces. On the other hand, clashes inside Tonenki, which is currently contested. So here is contested, pulling out of Orlivka, Badachi into Semenivka here, consolidating on that first line of defense. Now, we'll get a better idea if we look at it here. Now, this is Syriac's Google Map like overlay. So yeah, Tonenki, there is some area out of contest, but we're talking maybe 20% at best, probably less. Orlivka, it's looking like it's all under control, and Badachi, it's basically all in control. What it is saying is that troops are coming out into here. Let me draw that out into this area. Now, what I do say is how difficult is it actually going to be to leave from Semenivka back? Now, this is where people have said that this Russian advance will really stop in here because of these natural borders of the water, because this or here is open ground. Second line of defense sits basically through here. But you also need to think about not only Russia's ability to advance across here, but Ukraine's ability to, if this area is getting pulled out, how easy is it going to be to actually withdraw across this open ground with the artillery overmatch that we're seeing in this area? It's all very important things to think about. You need to think not only on offensive, but on defensive and withdrawals as well in the planning of operations like this. Now, General Shyrsky has gone on his Telegram and has said this: the situation in the area of the operation of the defense forces of Ukraine remains difficult. The enemy continues active offensive actions in many directions of the front line. The situation is particularly tense in Avdiivka and Zap directions, where Russian assault units are trying to break through the defenses of our troops and capture settlements of Tonenki, Orlivka, Semenivka, Badachi, and Krasnodarivka. So these areas, some of these have said to have come basically under control by at least Syriac here. Fierce fighting continues in the area of Verbove and Robertini. We'll talk about that later down in the west. Over which the enemy is trying to regain control. We know that Ukraine did get back some control just to the south of Robotyne, and Russia is trying to push in Verbova to get back then the beats of the Surovikin line that they lost. I started my work in the area of hostilities with the Donetsk Technical University and the units that hold the defense of the Avdiivka direction. The success of any battle depends on the quality of planning and how successfully the commander's plan is implemented by his subordinates. This is primarily determined by the experience and skill of the commander and commanders, the ability to correctly assess the situation and make adequate and timely decisions. A lot of people call out the timely decision to leave Avdiivka was done very, very late, and you'll see this with Ukrainian soldiers who were basically left up to them to, do what you want, either stay and get captured or we'll turn the radio off. At the level of battalion, company, and platoon commanders, so battalion, a couple hundred guys, company, 100 guys, platoon, 20 to 30 guys, and of course, you're going to have like lieutenant, major, lieutenant colonel. The main thing is to ensure the practical implementation of these decisions to hold positions and destroy the enemy fire by all means. It depends how bad that all means is going to be. During the work, some commanders were found to have certain miscalculations in mastering the situation and assessing the enemy, which directly affected the stability of defense in certain directions. So in Avdiivka, I took all measures to correct the situation on the spot with the allocation of additional resource of ammunition and material means, as well as necessary reserves, sitting in then Azov. I would like to note the courage, resilience and heroism of the servicemen of the 3rd Assault Azov and 25th Separate Airborne Brigades. With bold and decisive actions, they defeated the enemy who broke through the outskirts of Orlivka. So, saying that they've defeated Russia in Orlivka here. So it will be interesting to see where the maps then move tomorrow. So saying that is some successes there. We're not 100% sure. The only change this is showing is between Stepovi and Badachi in here. Now, there's no change near Pervomaysky on then the deep state map, but let's just have a look on this. Let's move these across so you can see. The Russian army continued advancing on the southern outskirts of Nevelsky and from the eastern plantations. So this is exactly where we saw the change yesterday or the day before, that it's saying that there's more ground being made in here, and we may see a collapse through of this area. Now, if we just look on this Google Earth, we just want to have a look at the sort of flatness of the territory through here. So this is we're looking from Tornenki, Orlivka, Badachi, these areas where we're talking about that we think Russia is in most of control or fully control of these areas, that they're pushing up. Semenivka is the only village left in here, and then you've got this open territory across here. So just to give you an idea of exactly how these areas are looking and the defensive works that sit through these regions by Ukraine as well. And we're not exactly sure on the preparedness of this either. Now, let's have a look over these maps. Now, nothing really has changed on the deep state map at all, but I'll just use it as a guide to show you the areas. So, of course, this is Bakhmut, where Russia is trying to build a buffer zone out from here like they're doing in Avdiivka. Makes it more difficult to fight back through this. Now, a lot of rumours is coming out that Ivanovsky has come under Russian control today. I'm not seeing anything, any geolocated footage, anything else to back this actually up. But we will look then at the Surak map and see what is then being said. As you can see here, it is showing a much further push in. So it is saying that this front line is sitting more like, say, this. It's saying that. Anyway, during the last 3 days, Russian army made significant advances inside the town of Ivanovsky, in which troops reached the Tereshkovo Street, which is the current line of contact with the Ukrainian army. In addition, Russian forces are trying to advance in the northern hills to take the trench positions under Ukrainian control. So, as we know, get rid of this, there are hills just to the north here. It basically sits in a bowl. I can show you that. And this is a very important position for then the next step, of which will then be Chasiv Yar, if they're able to actually do it. So you can see where this comes out here. So, of course, we're looking directly, or basically to the north. So that's directly to the north. You can see these hills here, which, of course, if we spin around to look west, then we're looking down onto Chasiv Yar, which will become more important as this war moves on. We're just going to come a little bit more north here, and we're looking in this Berestov front Vesely area for the next update. Deep State has no update here, but we'll talk about this. So just see this train line right here. It's talking about just this area here. The Ukrainian army launched a series of counterattacks northwest of Berestov, in which troops made some gains until the fortifications south of it, where Russian army managed to stop the advance. So that there was a line of contact there somewhere, and Ukraine has taken back some positions. Now, we need to move up even further north. Again, we've seen nothing around this Terny front, where we did think Russia made a fair bit of ground fairly quickly, but it has really stalled out. We keep moving up, and then we come to Debunking, where we had seen the same sort of deal, that move out quickly, and then it has seemed to stall. So have a look here. Situation, northeastern front. During Feb, the Russian situation around the village of Debunking has worsened. Russian troops withdrew from the hills west of the village due to pressure from the Ukrainian army, which has since prevented the Russian army from advancing in the area to fully secure Debunking again. So Ukraine has the upper hand in here and are pushing back against then the Russian forces. We can look at this on this map. We've talked about this actually before. We had a really good look over how this actually looked in here. So Debunking here. So you see this like lull down in the ground here. This would be very, very difficult to fight in, and Russia does not have the upper hand of ground in the assault in this area right here, especially for the use of mortars and artillery, which is the way we see that Russia likes to fight. Basically flattening things with artillery systems and mortars. You can put mortars under artillery and then armoured roll through there. Now, Crinky, no change on any map. Let's have a look here. Situation on Kherson front. There's been little change in the front line over the past 2 weeks. Russian army managed to secure the former bridgehead of Kazachi Lira. Meanwhile, fighting continues in Crinky. Russian troops continue to have difficulty in clearing the bridgehead, as Ukrainian troops are still hiding in the urban area and on the northern islands, from where sporadic incursions continue. Any attempts to land have failed during this time. So getting across for Ukraine, getting in from Russia, this area is just very, very difficult here. Not enough can get across here to expand this bridgehead, but also because it's such just rubble broken down in here, to actually take this back, incredibly difficult too, with the targeting from the right bank of Dnipro, where Ukraine has artillery systems, HIMARS, all of that as well. So difficult situation on the maps everywhere. We're not seeing too much real change, at least today on Deep State, but Avdiivka, I'll say, weighed out on it. Deep State for Russian games seems to be a day behind where Syriac sits. And Syriac and Deep State tend to line up, say 24 hours differently. Now, somewhere else I just wanted to speak about quickly was if we come into Mariinka and we see Krasnohorivka here, we have seen Russia try and advance into here. Syriac has said that they're basically on just the outskirts through here somewhere. But we have got footage today of, I can't show you, but TOS-1 Alpha, which is a thermobaric multiple launch rocket system being fired into Krasnohorivka. Now, of course, Ukraine has taken out, I believe, with visual evidence, 20 of those systems. They've got about 30 left, but there are people saying, how are these still getting fired into here? We thought that there were no missiles left for these. So there was a bit of a backfire of how many can actually be made there, and we're going to turn this around from that into when we talk about systems getting taken out that there isn't visual confirmation, and how that can backfire if untrue. Now, where we need to speak about is the claim that 3 Su-34 Russian bombers were taken out over the past 24 hours, bringing 13 in 13 days. Now, I'm not saying this did or didn't happen, but what I am saying is that there is no evidence for this, and extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence. Now, I'm not saying the helmet cam of the pilot being shot down, but there's no tracking on radar, there's nothing from the batteries being shown, there's no footage, and typically of anything like this, like I said right in the beginning of this war, very quickly we start getting video of a plane down it coming out of the air. We even got it when a Russian fighter malfunctioned in Russia, going then into a civilian building. We get things like that very quickly. We got it with even the A-50s. We got the radar and seeing it disappear off radar. We saw then one popping flares and going into the ground. It's nothing in this war isn't seen. And I think these claims that it's one of these things, it's like, well, you need to supply evidence along with this, especially that, both sides of this have been caught in multiple lies before, that people rightfully say, well, I want evidence. I want like visual confirmation that this has actually happened. And Zelensky, of course, then has had this. In February 24, Ukrainian warriors destroyed 13 military aircraft, 10 Su-34s, 2 Su-35s, and that they won't be able to use them against civilian targets within Ukraine anymore. And against, I guess, these targets up in Avdiivka, areas we're seeing them drop in Bakhmut, but it seems that that has increased more than ever. So this Ukrainian Ozint here has said from a military analyst, a Ukrainian journalist, that the FAB missiles have FAB bombs, they're not a missile, they're a glide bomb or just a dumb bomb, depending on the makeup, has had a increase in this. Now, despite the increased shooting of the Su-34, the intensity of the use of these frontline bombers with fighter functions has not decreased. And even more so, thus, over the past 24 hours, Feb 29th, an absolute record for the FAB was set. So they dropped 152, which is a hell of a lot. Remember when 50 were getting dropped on Avdiivka, it was an unbelievable amount. Previously, the record for these FAB was set in Feb from 16 to 17 in the amount of 151, of which 94 were deployed in Avdiivka and outskirts. Over the past 24 hours, the most intensive place of FAB arrivals was the outskirts of Avdiivka. Right, we're seeing Russia push. So the enemy wipes out the village of Thankyou from the face of the earth with 30 FABs flew through it and 10 through Orlivka. In total, the Russian armed forces FABs used in February exceeded 1,500. So 1,500 FABs in a month, which is also an absolute record since the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. All this indicates that despite the loss of the Su-34, the work of the FAB continues. That is, planes and pilots are sent with the awareness of the high risk of destruction to both aircraft and the crew. For one simple reason, FAB is the only tool for opening our defence lines and fortified areas. Not really, it's just a hell of a lot cheaper and easier to make, and Russia have more of them than things like cruise missiles. We've talked about why there is a lean into those systems rather than making these more difficult, more expensive systems. The situation is a stalemate for them because of such intensity of flights of Russian aircraft allows us to catch them more often. But it should be understood that for every plane shot down, there are several dozen flights that were not intercepted. For example, over the past day, there were more than 150 sorties from Su-34, 35 and Su-25. So 150 missions in the air. That is a hell of a lot. Now, we need to say, with these bombers being apparently taken down by the Ukrainian claims fighter bomber, who his track record is really, really good when it comes to accepting Russian losses, especially when it was things like A-50s, which is what you deny the most, is saying that this is basically bullshit. They're talking about the down Su-34s, that they're back in. And he sums up here saying, in short, yourself, and to understand the country has its own war, it's pointless to refute anything. The people on the other end of the line are stubborn. So saying, if there is a loss, I'll write. I can't waste time on refutation. So saying that if something's down, why I'm not going to lie about it. We're just going to call it out. And they are saying that there aren't these losses, and it's he said, she said at the moment. So we don't know where to believe. But if Russia claimed that it shot down 3 Ukrainian planes and provided no evidence, what would you say to that? And if your answer to that is, well, I wouldn't believe them for a second until there's evidence, well, maybe we should have it the other way as well. It makes sense to overestimate things for propaganda, morale purposes, especially when things aren't going well somewhere like this in Avdiivka. Where there isn't that much good news, that this is a bit of good news you can come out with, and people just will disregard everything else, even if there's no actual evidence. It makes sense to do that. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm just saying keep your head screwed on a little bit and maybe question some things occasionally, especially if you would question it the other way. So we're going to talk about Su-34s a little bit and production, but Ozint says basically the same. Claims by the Ukrainian Air Force of the fall of Avdiivka have gotten totally ridiculous. While several military aircraft, including A-50U, and 2 of them, have been shot down recently, their claims that multiple Su-34s or interceptions in a day with zero evidence are just a bad look. Such as today, they're claiming they're down 3. I think everyone understands that during war, you have to occasionally stretch the truth. Everyone understands that. And we know it happens for either your domestic or international audience, especially when the war is beginning to not go as well as you would like. But like I said before, these claims are starting to get ridiculous, and people will start to doubt the claims made by Ukrainian armed forces. And you can have a situation where it is a bit of a boy who cries wolf when you do actually hit something and people go, well, I'm not going to believe it because there was no evidence to back this up. Now, I agree with the bit we just read about the FABs. There is an increased risk to these bombers because they're flying 150 sorties. But, of course, that would have, there could easily be that on the effect of that more are going to get shot down. And I agree. But without evidence, it's hard to say that when we're seeing Russia increase by a lot, in some cases tenfold the amount of sorties and bombs dropped on target, and footage coming out of them seemingly having a lot of movement over the front line, claims of them coming down with no evidence and everything else is filmed. I don't know. I think if Ukraine has the evidence there, and it should have by radars, by whatever else, it's really important to put that along with it. And this was just the video because I know people like fighter jets, that fighter bomber shared then of this packet of Su-34s flying along. So, easy. Anyway, we're going to speak about then the Su-34 production, and this came out from UAC, who of course worked with Sukhoi making these aircraft, and put up, say, a photo like this of more of these Su-34s being built today. Now, this tells me too that maybe if you're pushing back and we're building them maybe today, does it just come at the right time, or does it is pushing back because maybe one is lost? I don't know. I'm not going to go down that, but that the Combat Drake is born here at the aviation plant. Cooperation with General Director is working there, increasing production volumes, expanding production, and hiring new employees. This is the agenda of the plant today and for long term. This applies not only to military production, but also to civilian programs. And we see in some of these photos making civilian aircraft as well. So our focus on our people. We do everything so that you can work productively, so that they are making more of these Su-34s on the ground currently to go into this war. Will it meet replacement? Well, we're not really sure. Definitely not if Ukraine's claims are correct and they're taking out multiple a day. But if it's taking out the amount that we've seen during the beginning of the war, it would be close to maybe negative, maybe into neutral of production versus loss of these aircraft. Now, something I just want to put in here as a personal note is if the ruble drops after this war, which it will, and the AUD, the Australian dollar, goes up, I am 100% going to go in one of these MiG-29 fighters in Russia, because my lifelong dream is to go in a fighter jet, but no other country I don't think is loose enough with we'll just put you in one. So I'm going to go over there and someone's going to take me up in some bloody plane. But of course, after everything's over, because I can't afford it. It's like 20 grand. Anyway, Rostec, who of course build the then A-50, which we've seen two A-50s, Russia's most valuable aircraft as far as the AWACS systems, have gone down over the past few weeks, has come out today through Russian media, through TASS as well, to say that they intend to restore previous production of the A-50 long-range radar detection and control aircraft, saying, of course, this plane is needed. Of course, we will do it. Not only does our army need it, but also goes very well for export. So to replace ones that have been taken down and to export them for money as well. So in September last year, Russell Electronics, holding the UAC, who we just spoke about, both companies are part of Rostec, handed over the Russian Aerospace Forces another modernized A-50U. So, of course, we know there's somewhere in 20 A-50s, but only several, to maybe 9, have been updated to the U's, and 2 of those have been taken out. And we do know, we spoke about this yesterday, that the replacement for the A-50U, which is the A-100, is expected into service at the end of 24, start of 25. And there are plans for a dozen of those. That said, we don't know how much sanctions and whatever could affect an electronic system like this. But I think with some of these claims that are getting a little bit unbelievable, at least without evidence. If there's evidence, I'll believe I'll believe it if there's evidence. But propaganda is very useful sometimes, but it can also backfire as well. And I think we've seen very recently some of this really backfire on Ukraine, because Ukraine and the Western media, who I'll put all in one, and the Western governments have been saying that Russia has basically been strategically defeated 18 months ago. And where's the front line then moving? Have a look at it right now. It'd be very difficult to say that. They're performing better both on the ground and in the air than they did day one, and being reported that there is an absolute lack of missiles, and this was in the first few months of the war, which we know making missiles is very difficult, very expensive. That's why we're seeing a shift to fabs. But to say that there's none, that there's supply from Iran and North Korea and domestic production, well, that is wrong also. And there can be huge propaganda backfires just like this. Now, the last thing I want to speak about, as we're getting very long in the tooth, I do apologize, is people are sharing more and more talk about Moldova, and from Russian pages have been then sharing this around. So an amphibious operation from Crimea into, just down south of Odessa, whilst a push out from Moldova to try and cut off through to Mykolaiv in here. Now, is this realistic? I don't know. We don't really know what is in Moldova. We don't know how many troops it would actually take to do this. I guess anything's realistic with enough bloody people and you're willing to have huge losses, but the amphibious ships in Crimea, Russia has lost a good percentage of them as well. There still is a big amphibious capability in Crimea, and there is as well at other areas down the coast as well, we know. As far as down in this as well, we know that other capabilities can be bought through Rostov into the Sea of Azov. But again, with these like 4D chess games, you're going to know this is going to be coming. We're going to see Russia doing, beach landings of amphibious somewhere else in the country. We're going to see ships moving down. You're going to have some warning for it. But if this was successfully cut off, yeah, it would be a very, very different story. But the amount of resource it actually takes and tactical, I guess, capability to get into these regions now, very, very, very different from day 1, week 1, week 2 of the war. It's going to be a very different game, especially this area right in here is going to be where once the Ukrainian F-16s come into country, this is going to be the most protected area from those planes. Protected by Ukraine from those planes, because you're going to have all the AWACS systems sitting in the Black Sea. You're going to have them then in Moldova and even Hungary, Slovakia to provide more and more battlefield awareness into here. This is where they're going to be by far the most deadly. And this is exactly where Ukraine needs them to be the most deadly if Ukraine's plan is to get down into the south, into Crimea, through these two areas by a land invasion. But either way, I guess it will see. Legends, I'm sorry this one is longer, but I did know this was going to be longer. Let me pause that. Look after yourselves. Have a great weekend, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.